Welcome back, everybody, to Two Guys and a Stack of Comics. Mike, we got some breaking news in the comic book world. How you doing, man?
Doing all right.
Doing all right?
Good.
You were doing better than some comic books are doing right
Right. Right.
now.
Right.
Recently announced Green Arrow canceled comic book series, 31 issues. That book has been canceled. Weirdly enough, that one started as a mini series, did well enough to justify a full series, but little under 3 years, and about I think it's about 6 or 7 issues after the last creative team left. They're folding up shop on that. Daredevil just finished its 25th issue. The book has been canceled. Now they're probably going to do this wait 5 months and reboot with a new number one sort of trend that we've seen. We've seen dozens of X-Men books canceled, some of which are canceled and then rebooted with a new number one. Mike, this trend, one, I think twofold that I'll kick it to you. We're seeing characters who have basically always been able to hold a comic book, get their comic books canceled now. I think you can say Green Arrow maybe not the best history of keeping it ongoing, but 300 something odd issues. I think believe Green Arrow's had 360 something issues, so it's not a character who struggled to get issues of his comic book published. And then so there's that part of why do you think that's happening? Second part for you, what do you think of this whole reboot, renumber, number one thing that they do?
Um, I think it's just a sign of the times as to where the publishers are at. So back in the day, you couldn't get enough new titles. And they were all selling, 100,000, 200,000 copies, 300,000 copies. That was the silver age, and it trickled into the Bronze Age. Things started to slow down a little bit, and then we had the big boom in the '90s, and they couldn't put enough titles out. But we are at a stage now where this industry that's lasted for almost 80 years or so, where the publishing of a lot of these titles just doesn't make sense anymore. And I think we're in this realm where the tertiary characters like the Flash, Green Lantern, Daredevil, I don't think that they'll entirely go away. And I think they will trickle into, as side characters and adventures in other books. And then once in a while, they'll start them, and they'll give them their own little spin-off series and see how that goes.
Mhm.
There's just hundreds of characters out there. We'd love to have them all in print again, like they were in the old days. But the publishing industry just really isn't at that place anymore. When you're finding it hard to sell Superman every month, how can you justify, selling the Flash and Green Lantern and Daredevil? I fully expect, Flash to get booted. He's usually one of the first ones to go, it seems. And so I kind of think that this is just where we're at. So I don't want you to be worried about your Daredevil because
No,
I think he's coming back, and I'm sure Green Lantern will be back. I mean, Green Arrow will be back, in a year or less. But it's just a different time and a place. And I think, although I don't like the rebooting and the number one constantly, I feel like that gimmick has definitely gone by the wayside. We've expended all that we can. I think there's burnout on new number ones, but I do think the positive nature of this is that when Daredevil comes out again, it'll be much more meaningful event for you to go and get Daredevil and see what they have planned for him for this little next mini run.
yeah, I think the weird thing is I know they're doing like a 5 or 6 month gap, most likely. They're doing some Daredevil Punisher tie-in series, which I don't get why it's not just the next issue of Daredevil and just have it guest starring the Punisher for an arc, but I really don't understand on that end. I understand your larger point as far as they're having trouble keeping huge peak characters in books right now. And so I get where you'd look and go, hey, maybe Green Arrow is not our priority right now. We need to figure out Superman and Justice League and some of those things. I do think the weird thing that we're at with the industry, with some of these books, sometimes these runs get like Daredevil, and I love the comic. I at one point owned every single issue of Daredevil. I own the vast majority of them still, but Daredevil's run is probably the worst of my lifetime that I can remember that just ended. It was a particularly bad run. And what I think with Marvel and DC anymore, they now get this thing of if there's a bad run or the sales stop, cancel it, reboot it as number one. And I just don't get the justification of how that works. And look, I understand the number one issue will sell really well. But eventually, water finds its level. In these comic books, pretty much when a new number one comes out, by issue six, you're kind of back at where you were, unless the run's just getting rave reviews. And so I think the interesting thing is, I think these new number ones and reboots actually might be deterring new readers and making older readers leave. And like for me, I read Iron Man basically from 2008 until the last year. And they finally canceled another Iron Man series, and I think they started the Insurgent Iron
He
Man.
Iron Man's like the poster boy for this.
Yeah, and I just at that point, the canceling of that previous series was my off ramp. It was like, no, man, no, I'm not in for another. And I think what used to be sort of great with this, and we're even seeing the books that are doing well. Like I'm not a big Transformers or GI Joe guy, but like Transformers just ended this 2 year run and they're starting with issue 25 and they're just putting Robert Kirkman on the book as the writer. Like they're not rebooting with a new number one. They're like, no, it's issue 25, and I think it's Kirkman and Dan Mora on it. And I think that's because they know, hey, fans who've been reading this, we want you to know your book is continuing, right? It's going on. I think with these new number ones, I think you do lose a fraction of your audience. And whatever audience you think you gain with a new number one, it's speculators. They buy it because they think, oh, number one Daredevil, let me grab it. And then, 6 to 8 months later, they find out like, oh, it's not really worth that much money, and it's selling for the same cover price that it was a few months back. And I
Or
just think
less.
it's not, or less, for sure, or less. And I think that's the thing that's frustrating with Marvel and DC right now is their insistence on canceling books and renumbering and rebooting and renumbering and rebooting. I think that trend is hurting audiences. But it's also like, man, if you guys put half as much effort into finding the right creative team for this comic as you do, how can we sales gimmick the numbers to make it look good? I think that's kind of why we are where we are. You've talked about this a lot, Mike. Older comic books used to have, I believe The Flash was an example you used of this, of they didn't want a new number one back in the day. And that didn't used to
No,
deter readers. Do you think a new number one actually turns the audience off in a certain way?
I think in this new era, it has. It certainly has for me. Like I won't buy a new number one of just anything now at the comic shop. Whereas before I probably would have. I mean, oh, let me give this a try. But comics are $5 a pop now. So um, a new number one and with the creative talent pool being kind of shallow,
Hmm.
you don't know what you're going to get unless you're, knowledgeable about the creatives. There have been many times I've picked up something I thought it'd be great, had a great cover, and then I'm like, what is this artwork? And this story doesn't work for me. And
Yeah.
and I just, threw $5 away for 22 pages of yuck.
Yeah.
Um, and so, but back in the day, The Flash, they had this conversation up at DC Comics in 1959, 58 probably. Yeah, it was December 23rd, 1958. I got the house ad right behind me. That was the release date of the new Flash's new comic after Showcase 4. And they decided that kids would more easily part with their dimes if they saw a book that had an established numbering. Rather, they're kind of the same ilk as I am right now. Like, am I gonna spend my $5 back then? It was 10 cents. uh, on a book that I don't know what's gonna be happening. Um, so they took a known property of theirs and they decided to continue the numbering after a almost a 10-year gap.
Hmm.
It was 1949 to 1959, almost 10 years. And just continue with 105. And it was a big success. It sold instead of making it a new number one, even though the character was renamed, had a new costume, same powers and everything, but just completely reinvented. They went with 105 because, if for the casual uh, buyer, if the cover was going to catch them, they might be more discerning with their money and go, well, this is an established book, even though it was brand new. So a little bit of trickery there. But I do think the comic book customer today is savvy to this new number one business. It doesn't fool us anymore. And you're right about the speculators. The bump in sales is all the speculators, buying two, three, four, five copies to try and sell on eBay in case it's a hit, which inevitably it's not.
Well, the whole
And
thing is, it's the number ones that are going to be a hit are going to be ones that are genuine number ones, not what they're doing now. Go ahead, Mike.
yeah, so I mean, so um, we are in a place now in the genre where characters like Daredevil and Green Arrow are known quantities. So if they give it a little time to breathe and they put some good creatives on it and then start it up again. I love what they did with Transformers.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know how long it was out of print.
No, it just continued on. Just within the
It
next
just
month, they just new creative team rolled in.
So let me ask you this. So you've got this great creative team and you're in the editorial office of Marvel and the editor says, I think, it's been 5, 6 months. I'm going to put a team on Daredevil. Um, who would you put and how would you handle the numbering situation, giving the end of the last run? I don't know what happened, but would you try and tie in and pick up where they left off? And
I mean, the weird thing is, like this entire run that just ended, they basically just at the end kind of reset and put the toys back where they were. So I think any writer who takes over Daredevil could take it on. I'd love to see the guy who writes Moon Knight, Jed McKay, get a shot at it. I think he'd do pretty well with Daredevil. As far as the artist, I mean, I think there's so many who could do a good job. There's a guy named Alessandro Capuccio who's been doing Ultimate Wolverine. I think would be good. I think it'd be really cool if they got those guys on it because they did a great job with Moon Knight. But I
so
think,
you get to pitch your idea to the editor, right?
yeah, I
And
think
and
that
and do you go, this should be a new number one, or should we,
I
where did it leave off at?
one thing
32, 31?
I wouldn't do number one, and I wouldn't keep the numbering of what was before. I would just go to the legacy numbering of it. Daredevil's at like issue, I want to say 700 something. At this point, just put the legacy at 600 something, put the legacy numbering on it, and go from there. I think the number one
I
gimmick.
love that idea, the legacy numbering.
Well, and we see Spider-Man does this with this. It was, I think in 2014 they did a new number one for Spider-Man.
But
I
then they
think
go back and then they reboot it at number
And then it
one,
got to like 750, and then it was like,
and
okay,
then
we're
they have
back
the
to
legacy
legacy numbering
issue.
so that we can charge you more because it's special 750th issue. And then I had another number one, and then we get to issue 800 legacy numbering, and then we keep that for issue 900 legacy numbering. And I think the thing is, the gimmick that they're trying to do is I think they're trying to entice new readers into picking stuff up with a new number one. I think the issue is you will lose a lot of those readers. And I literally saw this at my comic shop this week. A guy came in and he was trying to read Moon Knight. And this is a complaint I've had about this exact series. He was trying to read Moon Knight. He was recommended to him by a guy who worked in the shop. And he was looking for the next issue because he was reading a couple years back. And he's like, well, what happened? Where's issue 31? They're like, well, there is no issue 31. It was actually renumbered as this, and it became Fists of Khonshu Moon Knight or Vengeance of the Moon Knight. He's like, okay, so how many issues is that? It's like, well, that was 12 issues, and then it was renumbered again, and it's Moon Knight Fist of. And it's like, it's been Jed McKay the whole time writing the book. And we should be at like issue 55. Instead, we're on our third number one or our third number 12. And I think if you get these readers, and I've noticed my son with manga on this, my son picks his manga series basically based on what has a lot of volumes because he's under the idea that hey, and it's worked for him. As far as when he originally wanted to start reading One Piece, he loved it because he went into a store and they had like volume 68, and he picked it up and he read it and he thought, oh my gosh, this is so cool. There's like 67 other volumes for me to go get, and he knew I can get invested in this story. It's going to be around. I think where we're in the worst possible place is there are a ton of Moon Knight graphic novels for a fan to pick up, or Daredevil, or Green Arrow, or whoever. It's just it can't follow your own story because we keep renumbering it all the time. I've noticed this myself with characters that I want to read. It's really easy to collect until the 2000s. And then it's like, well, this was a Moon Knight number one, and then there was another Moon Knight number one, and then 4 years later there was another Moon Knight number one. And it's like, this is what are we doing? And so I think this goal of getting new readers, I think when you keep canceling and renumbering, you're kind of indicating to those fans who would be catching up on it, hey man, don't get too comfortable. This isn't going to be around. And I think that's a huge loss. I think the other part is for the fans who are reading it, we're just tired of them extracting every dollar out of us that they can. And I think it's more likely to drop than not in that I'm so exhausted of new number ones in it. Basically, for the next issue of Daredevil, whenever it comes out, I'm gonna have to pay $6.99 instead of $3.99 or $4.99 because Marvel wanted to try a sales gimmick. And is it gonna mean the quality of the book's gonna be better? No. Does it mean I'm gonna get a brand new, fresh starting on point that changes him? No. It's gonna be the same, and I love Daredevil, so I'll buy it. But the whole thing is, when they keep doing these gimmicks,
They
they're
got
just
you.
there's no rhyme or reason to it. I mean, DC's bad at this too.
Mm.
DC did a brand new Batman number one a couple weeks ago. Now they don't reboot Batman often. I think it's only the fourth time that's been a number one in Batman's history, which is dang impressive for most comic book characters. But there was also like they let this run of Batman run for 163 issues. And then it was just like, that's it. And they still haven't finished that volume because Jim Lee's like 6 months late on Hush. But it's like, why was 164 the number you were like, oh, people will buy a 164, but 165, nah, can't do it. We need a number one. And I think that's the part that's so frustrating with this is there's no rhyme or reason to it. I believe if you're going to do number ones, the only time I've seen it work that I thought was really cool, I loved when the new 52 put everything at issue one. And then you knew at least for the first year, every month, if you knew what every book was on issue 12, every book was on issue 13, every book was on issue 25, the ones that lasted. And that was kind of cool because you knew if you're reading one book, you know, okay, there's that issue. I have how many to track down. It was a really easy way to keep it. And because that was a genuine, fresh starting point, it really made sense. Now we're literally keeping the same creative team sometimes and putting a number one on it. And like the Flash was a great example of this. You know,
Yeah.
me and you have both read the Flash for you've read it for forever, but like me and you have been at least collecting the current run since Rebirth. Josh Williamson was on that book for 100 issues, I believe, and then towards the end of his run, they went to the classic numbering of like 800. And then Jeremy Adams took over. And Jeremy Adams, I think the whole time he wrote it was like 800 to 875 or something like that. And then for some reason, when Jeremy Adams has done like brand new number one, it's like, why was that switching creative team? Let's just keep going. But the next one was, we need a new number one. There just doesn't seem to be a reason for it. And I think that's where we get frustrated. Last, Mike, to kind of close this out, me and you have pitched this before, that the idea of quarterly issues or 6 months at a time or a sizable gap of it. Um, I'm not going to vouch for the quality of the company, but I saw a company online that was doing some interesting. There's a company called Ripaverse, and again, I haven't read much of their books, but I've just seen what they've done. Largely, they do like one volume. It's like 60 to 100 pages at $20 a pop, and then you typically will, from what I've seen, you wait a couple months and then they have another one. Do you think that model would work for monthly comics if instead of these gimmicks and number one and 975 and all that stuff, do you think going to a model like that, or I guess manga might be a more blatant example of where you wait a few months. I know they release it in chapters that for some folks, but they typically do those collections. Do you think that would be a sustainable model for comics if it was instead of, hey, Flash, whatever, it's just every 6 months there's a Flash graphic novel that comes out or something like that?
You know, they sell it in both formats right now, so they got the best of both worlds, the big two does.
Hmm.
Um, it may get to that point. I think the big two are looking at the success of some of these that do that, and are probably considering it. It would be a big shakeup, though. You may want to start with just a few titles, like say maybe Daredevil. Say they put
Release
a
it.
creative team on Daredevil for 3 months, and then they release, 68 page, whatever, and
Mhm.
then you go another 3 months. I think readers would enjoy the larger chunk of reading material at a time. I know I would. I usually wait. I pick up my monthlies, and a lot of titles I'll wait 2 or 3 months so I can read a good chunk of the story in one sitting. And I know other readers do the same. My son, he doesn't pick up single issues anymore. He's like, oh, wait till it comes out in trade, and if it's
Mhm.
good, I'll buy it and I'll read the whole thing, and then and he reads it. Um, so I understand that that's probably where the market's going. I feel more likely than not, it'll probably be some kind of hybrid model soon, especially with these tertiary characters. That get canceled for 3, 4, 6 months, a year, and then come back. I don't know. So does it make sense monetarily for the publisher to just say, why put out the floppies when we're going to collect it all in a trade anyway? You can definitely see the financial advantage there, and just putting out, two trades a year.
Yeah, I think the
It
thing is,
makes
I
me
think we have
sad though. It's kind of heartbreaking
no,
though.
and it's kind of advocating for the death of the floppy comic book, but I do think that
Yeah.
may be kind of where we're at in that one thing, there's only really one thing anymore that people wait weekly for, and that's sports. Everything else is in an on-demand world. And the Netflix model of TV, I don't know any. I mean, I work in a rather large office. I don't know anyone who watches like linear TV where they're actually watching every Wednesday when a show comes on. They binge it on Netflix or, they watch the new episode on the streaming service and watch a couple at a time. That whole must-see TV era that used to existed where 7 o'clock you needed to be in front of the television to watch Seinfeld or Friends or whatever was on. That's just not how people do things anymore. And so the interesting thing is for comic books, they don't even deliver on that though. And that one of the things is, if it was where comic books, these monthly releases, you could set your watch to it and it's like, hey man, it's always going to come out when it's supposed to, that would work. It doesn't work that way though. And that we've got Jim Lee Batman issues that are 4 or 5 months late. We get comics that are often delayed. We get events that are delayed. We get comic books that are promised and that never release. There was a book called Batman Gargoyle of Gotham that I believe started at the end of 2024. And I don't think that thing's wrapping up until 2026 for 4 issues. I think where we end up with these things, we kind of as fans have the worst of all models. And that if you're a trade waiter, you have to wait 6 to 9 months to get the story, and it's often been spoiled beforehand unless you just completely check out of any sort of spoilers that are there. If you're the single issue person, everything's written in a 6 issue arc anyway. So the days of getting a 1 issue kind of thing where it's like that was satisfying. No, you're pretty much always getting 1/6 of a story every month at a higher rate than you used to. And if you're a collector who looks at these things, man, they're renumbering and rebooting so dang often that a lot of times it's just going to be like, man, I'm going to quit and go to the manga kind of thing where it's like, hey, what do I want to read in One Piece? Well, I just read volume 4. Here's volume 5. Whereas you do the same thing with Iron Man. It's like, well, I just finished Iron Man issue 20. Where's 21? Oh, that doesn't exist. It's actually now a different title with an issue number 1, and there's 6 volumes of that. We have the worst of all worlds. And I think the other part is for you and me, the Wednesday guys, we kind of get taken to the cleaners the most. And that the number ones, $6.99. Special 10th issue, $6.99. Special 12th issue, $6.99. Anniversary 25th issue, $25.99. And it's like that's where we kind of end up where we're just always paying more money for less. And I think if we had this 6 month gap in Daredevil makes no sense to me. Just you knew the book was ending. The solicitations come out 3 months in advance. You're seriously telling me in 3 months you couldn't find a new writer and an artist to draw an issue of Daredevil to put on the stands? And I think that's kind of just where we're at.
Everybody's working, everybody's working over at the Indies.
Yeah.
They're all booked up.
No, and
I
this
like I tell you what, I like the idea of the legacy numbering. And I
yeah.
think they really should consider just going with that for a while. And if you don't have a good enough team to put out the book, it's okay to wait on it for a little while. Let's get the X-Men figured out. Let's get Superman figured out and Spider-Man to where that's hitting on all cylinders and Batman. And
Well,
and then
that's the thing is they act like the legacy numbering will scare folks, and it's like no, a great creative team people will buy. When
oh
the
yeah.
initial Hush came out, I think that was Batman 606 or something like that. No one cared. Jim Lee's on the book. I'm going to buy that. And sales moved up. And yeah, it's just it's interesting. It's just really interesting. I think great point you raised at the end, and this kind of can close it. The indies always get this right. And that's when they do a number one for indies, like Conan did with Titan, truly was a new kicking off point with when they did Flash Gordon, when they just recently did the Phantom. That was a true number one, a true starting point. And if you're a reader, you know, okay, this is a new era of this character. Whereas Marvel and DC, oftentimes it's just an extension of what was being read before. And if you are a person reading it, you're frustrated because they just renumbered your comic book. And if you're a new reader, you pick it up and you're like, what the heck, man? This is like part 36 of a story. This isn't number one. And it's just frustrating for everything. Any last thoughts to close it out, Mike, on this? Where do you think the future of this will be collected editions? Or if you had to guess 5 years from now, where are we? Collected editions only? Or you think me and you are still Wednesday Warriors going and picking stuff up?
I think we're still going to be Wednesday Warriors, and I feel like they're gonna figure it out. I do feel like the field will slim down a little bit, and I'm hoping when they do, the quality goes up. That's kind of like what you and I have always talked about, like maybe less comics but higher quality. And I think they're headed in that direction, and that's why I feel pretty good about the floppies being around. But I do think that the big two will step their toe into that straight to compact or straight to trade kind of thing for some stories. And I think they'll see how that goes.
I
And
know a
when
couple
that
years
happens,
ago, that
when
happens to be
that
interesting.
happens,
Well, and the
yeah.
thing is, if they do that, they've really got to commit to it. And the last time I remember them trying this, they did this Earth One series, and they got like Jeff Johns, and I think it was Gary Frank for Batman, and J. Michael Straczynski, and some guys for Superman. And they were releasing like these 90-page graphic novels. All of them only went like 3 volumes, and it took like 5 years for them to come out. And it's like that could have worked if it wasn't 3.5 years between stories. And that's the other part is you need comic books require consistency. And so if they ever do go to that graphic novel format, you can't have it be that like, oh hey, the new volume of that's coming, and you spend the first 10 minutes like, what the heck happened in this one 2.5 years ago? And you have to remind yourself, I think they've got to figure out and bridge the gap on some. But fun for us to be. What do you guys think down below? What do new number ones mean to you? What do you think of these series being canceled? Would you prefer them to stay in the floppy format or move to a more graphic novel style? Always interesting for us to see what you think. As always, folks, thanks for watching. God bless you. We'll catch you in our next video.
Thanks, everybody.